Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it will be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story. You want me to call the cops? Not a problem. Might as well share something that happened to me. Saw a thread that reminded me about this incident. This happened to me in 2013. I was over 30, had gone back to school, and it was a Friday before finals week of my last semester to finish my CE degree. Bordering around campus, it is rather low income and not highly educated, and not a place I frequented. I walked into a gas station, we will call it Square L, about 7:30 a.m. Locally, that's 30 minutes after they start selling alcohol. County is dry between 3 and 7 a.m. Grab 2 of the largest packs of cheap beer they sell, and head up to the register. No big deal, just stock enough for a small study party with friends on campus later that day. The person behind the register eyes me suspiciously as I set them on the counter and tells me I am not buying them. I politely explain that it is after 7 a.m. and I don't see a problem. The manager, denoted by dress shirt instead of polo, leans over and tells her to get my ID. So she asks me for it. I'm like, fine, whatever. And I fidget around a minute before realizing it's in my car. I said as much and offered to grab it, and she told me to go ahead. I dash out to my car, grab my wallet from my book bag, no big deal. Walk back in and present it to the person at the register, who promptly glances at it, snickers, snaps it in half, tosses it in the trash, and tells me to get the heck out of her store. I stood there a minute, sort of dumbfounded. The manager tells me to get the heck out of the store or the police will be called and someone is getting arrested. I mumbled something along the lines of, oh crap, and opted to comply with the second half. I went to my car, grabbed my phone, called non-emergency and told them I just had my driver's license taken and destroyed. Read off the address and ended my call, then headed back inside and stood. The manager tells me that's it. They are calling the cops. I let her know I already did. The clerk laughs and shouts for the people in the store to hear. Y'all want to stick around. This punk called the cops on us for taking their fake ID. It took about 10 minutes, but they showed up. As they arrived, the manager rushed out the door and I walked behind. The cop asked for me immediately by name, dismissing the manager pointing at me and rattling off about my fake ID. I told him what happened and I was told to leave or the cops were to be called and someone was to be arrested. He then takes the statement from the manager, then the clerk, then requests the ID be retrieved from the trash. He looks it over and hands the 2 pieces back to me. He hasn't said anything other than simple requests for the information up to this point, then asks me to come along. And we're going to have a chat outside. At this point, I'm actually growing a bit concerned. He punches in the DL number, and up pops my face and information. Clean history, post-driving, and criminal. He then lets me know that destruction of a license is a misdemeanor in this state, and asks which one snapped it. We have a brief conversation, and at this point, he's smiling ear to ear. He asks me if I want to press charges, and at this point, I've already missed first class. So state I do. I'm told to play along with him and we share a course of action. By this time there were 4 squad cars and police milling about. Customers had grown scared. We walked back in, I'm staring at the floor looking pensive, and he says loudly, "What do we say?" And nudges me. I politely say, "I'm very sorry this happened, and I'm sure it won't happen again." The clerk and the manager begin chuckling. I then finish with the manager requested the clerk take it who snapped it, then the manager is the one who said someone is getting arrested. The officer undid the cuffs from his belt, walked up to the clerk, and began with Miranda rights. Another did the same to the manager. Another 30 minutes rolled by while they are sitting in the backs of squad cars. The store is devoid of employees until someone walks out from the back cooler, and I wait patiently. Eventually, they are cut loose on their own recognizance, and I'm given a date to play witness in court. We head back in and the manager is irate, and the employee on release bolted. I pay for my now warm beer and leave. My professor got a great laugh out of the police report and let me do my project presentation late anyway. Edit. As for the court date, one of them pushed it further, so it turned into 2 dates. As a witness, I showed up, but wasn't really needed. The first pleaded no contest to a charge for destruction of state property. Got 6-month probation and 1,000 hours of community service, as well as having to write me an apology. The other ended up pleading guilty to an obstruction charge and got 6 months probation only. And for those who say 1,000 hours isn't possible, it started as probation and 100 hours for the first person who pleaded no contest. They spoke out against the judge, he upped it to 200, then 500, and 1,000. Kids kept mousing off, and I remember there was a string of other offenses on their record as well. The manager had only had a previous possession charge, but on his date acted humble and polite in court. The total opposite of how they had in the store with the cops. I never did get the apology letter. If it was written and turned in, I have no idea where it went. For perspective on how this county does things, I myself received 200 hours and 6 months probation for getting caught stealing a pack of cigarettes when I was 19. We were all young and dumb once, and they did not used to hide behind the registers everywhere, which I served in about 50 hours picking up trash. Then the guy signed off on the whole time, so I doubt they would have to actually serve the whole time. Next story. Never driving again. This was about 20 years ago, give or take. My uncle lived in a residential neighborhood with many kids. The speed limit was about 25 miles per hour on his road. His daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter, Coco, let's call her, lived across the street. The granddaughter was around 4 at the time and would normally wander across the street to see her grandpa and go to his house. Yes, my cousin was not a good mom. The first of many signs being that she let her pre-kindergarten-aged daughter just walk off on her own. Lucky Coco was a good child and only went straight to my uncle's house. Or this could have been an awful missing child story. Sadly, some people think it's okay to speed in residential neighborhoods, even when there might be children playing. This one crazy speeder in a new decked-out Camaro came flying through the neighborhood every day around 50 to 60 miles per hour, drove my uncle crazy. Screaming at him to slow down did not deter him. Children at play signs did not deter him. Calling the cops did nothing. Cars parked curbside on this street, and kids lived all around here. Anything could happen. A kid could dart out between parked cars into the street chasing a ball that got away. Someone could get hurt very easily. Even worse. Well, worse in my family at least. Coco could be walking over to see my uncle and this guy, at this speed, wouldn't be able to stop in time. So my uncle thought about it for a while on how to get this guy to slow down. My uncle is normally an act now, think about it later type of guy. So I'm impressed he plotted something rather than just throwing a hammer and breaking out the windshield. But my uncle wanted to make sure this guy really got the message that he didn't need to be anywhere so fast that he endangered lives. Endangering lives. Yep, that's the idea. You see, Uncle had an old covered baby carriage from when Coco was an infant. She used it to play with her dolls. This Camaro guy has a pretty predictable schedule. So my uncle took the carriage with a doll in it outside and hid in front of his car, parked at the curb where he knew Camaro guy could not see him. According to the schedule, Camaro guy would be coming the opposite direction, so he would be seeing the rear of my uncle's car from his vantage. My uncle was in front. Uncle heard the Camaro coming, waited a moment as he neared, and pushed the carriage into the road. For added dramatic effect, my cousin was nearby and screamed, "The baby! Catch the carriage!" The Camaro guy had no time to react, and he plowed into the carriage, sending the doll flying. Uncle and cousin ran for the doll like it was a baby, freaking out, and they looked at the driver. The jerk did not stop, but you could tell he was freaked out. Uncle said he turned bail and turned at the nearest corner, one house down, and off his normal route to get out of there. Well, reason stands that the guy must have figured out he didn't kill a baby in a hit and run because they'll be in the news, but we never know for sure. What we do know is that the guy never came through the neighborhood again, at any speed, and he was spotted a number of times at local public bus stops, waiting on the bus. I was in that area about 5 years ago with my uncle, and he pointed out someone on the bus bench waiting, and he started laughing, telling me it was a Camaro guy waiting for a bus again. As I said before, this happened around 20 years ago. We saw him 5 years ago, and I guess that scared him out of driving for life. I think he got the message. Next story. The camera was stolen? Okay, I'll file a police report. I do marketing for a general contractor in the US. Part of my job requires me to organize the installation of cameras on the job site, mainly for marketing purposes like time lapses and stuff like that. My boss lives near the site that I was setting up the camera for and offered to drop the camera off on his way into work the next day. The next day, he texted me to confirm where he dropped it off and also notified the site superintendent, the boss of the site. The super would take the care of the actual installation, which involved drilling it into a post and plugging it in. Pretty simple stuff. Also important to the story, this super was retired a year ago and came back to work for us for unknown reasons, so you could say that he's a little checked out of working at this point in his life. Fast forward to the day after my boss dropped it off. I called the super to confirm that he had installed it. He tells me that he never saw the camera on the site, and I told him to check where my boss said he dropped it off, which was under a trailer and covered by an extra sign. He still claims it is nowhere to be found, sends a picture of where my boss left it and then suggests that it may have been stolen. I go to my boss and explain the situation, and we both agree that something does not seem quite right. We call him up to see what he says, and he's still sticking to his story that it was stolen. But he sounds a little hesitant over the phone. My boss dropped it off around 7:30 a.m. and the super was at the job site around 8 a.m. Not exactly prime hours for theft and a very small window of when the site was unsupervised. Standard procedure for when something is stolen from the job site is to file a police report and all that jazz. I also called the camera provider to see if there was any way to GPS track the camera. Unfortunately, there was not. But the super does not need to know that. Me and my boss agreed to craft up some beautiful nonsense in an email to see if anything happens. We said that we will follow standard procedure and file a police report for the camera. I also mentioned that I will be calling the camera provider to have them track the camera so we can get it back. The next morning he calls me back and says that he found the camera in the woods, on the edge of the job site, and blamed one of the subcontractors for moving it. He probably dropped the load in his pants when he read the whole GPS tracking and covered his tracks. I think he was either trying to sell the camera or just really did not want to install it. Since then, the camera has been installed after bugging the same super for about a month. Nothing ever came of the suspected theft, due to lack of evidence, and the super still works here. Next story. Your grandpa threw you into the fire pit? We better call the cops. So I'm a psychologist and a counselor with years of experience working on a child helpline. We would often get prank calls from poor children, and we always took it as a good sign, because at least they know our number in case they ever needed it. Our policy was to treat prank calls as real calls because, well, you never know what could be true and just sound exaggerated. Usually the prank call would end if we caught a kid in a lie and told them we were confused because a minute earlier they told us something different. Usually by that point the kid would start laughing or go quiet and end the call. But some of the kids were really dedicated to the stories they would come up with and would call us out on it if they felt we weren't taking them seriously. For example, one kid called and told me his grandfather threw him into the fire pit, and I of course told him that worried me. And I asked if he could explain a bit more what happened. He proceeded to tell me that his grandpa threw him in there so that he could rise from the ashes a new man. I stifled a chuckle and calmly asked the child if he was maybe pranking the helpline, to which he got offended. So I proceeded to treat the call as a real one, and boy was he dedicated. We spent 15 minutes talking about if he's in a safe spot now, does he have anyone around him who could protect him, or who he could trust to tell this to? What about grandma? What about the neighbors? He would come up with something for everything. He was safe now hiding in the forest, his grandpa hit his grandpa with a frying pan, and the neighbors couldn't be trusted because they were also scared of his grandpa and so on. So as a last card up my sleeve, I told him I was worried about his safety and that we can call the police to come get him and protect him. He proceeded to tell me that I shouldn't waste their time. He doesn't know where he is, so they couldn't possibly find him. I told him I could help them if he gave me his phone number so that the police could find his location, and he hung up. For anybody worried that the story was true, he called a few days later with a new story about his sister burning his face with a hot pancake. Yeah, creative kid. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.